The start of 32-bit, 64-bit, and 3D graphics, the use of CDs, online gaming, high-definition gaming, motion sensors, and virtual reality. These were some of the revolutionary features that ushered video game consoles into the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th generations. How did they come to be? Let's find out on Feed My Curiosity. On the last episode of Feed My Curiosity, we looked at the video game crash of 1983 and how the video game industry's unexpected recovery led to the third generation of consoles, starting with the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System. We also looked at the fourth generation of consoles that included the release of Sega Genesis, the Super Nintendo, and the PlayStation, introducing the world to 16-bit gaming. On today's episode, we'll conclude our three-part series by exploring the 5th through the 8th generation consoles that dominated since the early 1990s. From the Sony PlayStation to the Xbox, PlayStation Portable to the Switch, let's take a look at what made these consoles so special. If you like learning about science, technology, history, and tons of other subjects, don't forget to help us grow and show your support for Feed My Curiosity by pressing the subscribe button. The 5th generation began in 1993 with the release of the Atari Jaguar and the 3DO Interactive. The Jaguar had been marketed as the world's first ever 64-bit console, which meant more processing power, while the 3DO Interactive was marketed as Time Magazine's 1993 Product of the Year at launch. It was also a special kind of console, as it was more like a series of hardware specifications that several other electronic manufacturers could license and produce under their own name. Panasonic, Gold Star, now LG, and Sanyo all produced models of the 3DO. Both the 3DO and the Jaguar also used CDs over previous consoles that used cartridges to store their games. 1 year later, in 1994, the world would be rocked by the release of the Sega Saturn and the Sony Playstation. The Saturn had notable hits like Virtua Cop and Virtua Fighter 2, and iconic franchises like Tomb Raider debuted on the Saturn. Meanwhile, the Sony PlayStation, which was originally meant to be an add-on to the Super Nintendo, released as its own standalone unit. As CDs were becoming a favorite for game storage, Nintendo agreed to a deal with Sony to develop an add-on that would allow the Super Nintendo to read discs. However, that deal fell through when Nintendo struck a deal with Philips Electronics instead. Sony decided to continue developing the technology on its own and used it in the PlayStation, Sony's first ever console. In 1995, when it was introduced to the United States, it had already pre-sold over 100,000 units. Less than a year after its September launch, the PlayStation had sold roughly 2 million units in the US and over 7 million more around the world. This success made PlayStation the industry leaders, introducing beloved classics like Ridge Racer and Crash Bandicoot. In 1998, we were introduced to the Pocket Station, a hybrid memory card and digital assistant that could be inserted into the bottom of the PlayStation. Compatible games like Final Fantasy VIII and Street Fighter Alpha 3 could transfer minigames into the Pocket Station so people could play it on the go. By the end of 2003, the PlayStation had sold 100 million units worldwide. Nintendo wouldn't leave themselves without a 64-bit console. Before we get into what they made, let's take a pop quiz. What was Time Magazine's Product of the Year in 1993? 3DO Interactive, Atari Jaguar, Sony PlayStation, or Sega Genesis? Do you think you know the answer? Leave your response in the comments below. Nintendo had made its way to the 64-bit world with the release of the Nintendo 64 in 1996. The console is famously known for introducing the analog stick on its controller, positioned between the directional pad and the buttons. The analog stick allowed gamers to aim with 360-degree precision within a 3D environment. Prior to this, it was only possible with the personal computer, thanks to the mouse and keyboard. Games that were made popular due to the analog stick were Super Mario 64 and GoldenEye 007, with the latter paving the way for the first-person shooters on video game consoles. After the failure of the Saturn, Sega attempted to make a comeback with the Dreamcast. Despite losing out on Electronic Arts developing sports games for the console, Sega spent $100 million to market it, and it was released in North America on September 9, 1999. On launch day, it sold over $97 million worth of its products. In just 2.5 months, over 1 million Dreamcasts were sold, making it the fastest-selling console in North America at the time. With 128-bit graphics, online play, and download capabilities, the Sega Dreamcast started the 6th generation of video game consoles. Sony was also gearing up for the release of the PlayStation 2. After revealing it in Japan on September 20th, 1999, days after the North American release of the Dreamcast, the PS2 launched in North America in October 2000, and it immediately made $250 million off of console, game, and accessory sales. The PlayStation 2 was rich in features. It was able to play both DVD and audio CDs. It was backwards compatible with most PS1 games and allowed you to play online against other people using an internet connection. It also had a bunch of popular exclusive titles such as Gran Turismo, Kingdom Hearts, Ratchet & Clank, Up Your Arsenal, and Okami. To this day, with over 155 million units sold, the PS2 is the best-selling console of all time. Enter new consoles, all dreaming of being the next PlayStation, the Nintendo GameCube, and the Microsoft Xbox. The GameCube, released in 2001, would be the first Nintendo-produced console that would not use cartridges. Instead, games were played using small discs. The controllers also featured a single analog stick for high precision in-game. The GameCube would be the first and only Nintendo console that required additional memory cards to save game progress. Some of the popular games that helped the GameCube become a commercial success were Luigi's Mansion, Super Mario Sunshine, and Mario Kart Double Dash. The Microsoft Xbox launched a little later that same year. The Xbox would be the company's introduction into the video game console industry and was able to sell over 1 million consoles within the first 3 weeks. Bungie's Halo Combat Evolved was originally planned to be a third-person shooter, but made the switch to be a first-person shooter, otherwise known as an FPS, to take advantage of the Xbox's hardware capabilities. It was the console's flagship game and is considered to be one of the revolutionary games that changed FPS forever. A few months after its release with the Xbox, over 1 million copies of Halo had been sold. A year later, Microsoft would introduce Xbox Live, allowing gamers to compete against each other from around the world. The Xbox Live Starter Kit contained 12 months of Xbox Live, a headset, and access to 2 online demos like Whacked and MotoGP. Over 150,000 people subscribed within the first week of launch. The handheld world of video game consoles were also treated well. The Nintendo Game Boy was continuing to have success, and along with its successor, the Game Boy Color, had millions of units sold worldwide. In 2001, the Game Boy Advance, the successor to the Game Boy Color, was released. The 32-bit handheld had a new shape, shoulder buttons, and improved graphics. Some games from the Super Nintendo, such as ones from the Donkey Kong Country series, were remastered with updated audio and graphics to take advantage of the GBA's hardware capabilities. The 7th generation of video game consoles began with the handhelds, starting with Nintendo's release of the DS in November of 2004. The DS stood for 2 things: developer system and dual screen. The DS featured 2 screens, with one having touchscreen capabilities. It also had a built-in microphone, as well as wireless functionality that allowed local play with another DS without the use of cables. The DS had separate cartridge slots for both DS and Game Boy Advance games. The PlayStation Portable followed soon after, with a North American release in March of 2005. Its high-end GPU and 4.3-inch screen made it a powerful and popular multimedia entertainment device at the time. The PSP used a UMD, or Universal Media Disc, as its primary storage medium. Microsoft also took the leap into the 7th generation with the release of the Xbox 360 in late November of 2005. With a 3.2 GHz PowerPC tri-core Xenon CPU, 512 MB of GDDR3 random access memory, and a 500 MHz ATI Xenos graphics card, along with Dolby Digital audio capabilities. The Xbox 360 offered the capability to play games in high definition. The hardware capabilities made it a multimedia device with plenty of music and video playback features. The marketplace also made space for independent game developers to sell cheap games to consumers. Additionally, it updated controller design, accounted for ergonomics, making it one of the most comfortable controllers to hold at the time. Sony followed a year later with the release of the PlayStation 3 on November 17, 2006. To give consumers options, Sony had provided 2 versions of the console, one with a 60GB hard drive, built-in wireless capability, and the ability to read flash RAM cards, and one with just a 20GB hard drive without the additional features of the 60GB model. The PS3's cell processor had 7 microprocessors in one chip, making it the most powerful video game console because of the amount of calculations animations it can make. It also partnered with Nvidia to make the console's graphics card. Additionally, the PS3 had a built-in Blu-ray player, was able to connect with the PSP, and was the first console to debut the PlayStation Network, which offered a variety of online services, such as interaction with other players, downloading games, music, and videos. Just 2 days later, Nintendo released the Wii. This console focused more on movement. Its Wii remote controller allowed gamers to control on-screen characters based on how they move the controller around in the real world. The early Wii models also had backwards compatibility with GameCube games. The Wii was a popular system for families, and in December of 2009, over 3.8 million Wii units had been sold. Sony and Microsoft would also implement movement sensors with console gameplay, with the PlayStation Move for PS3 and Kinect for the 360. This leads to where we are today, the 8th generation. This generation includes the handheld releases of the Nintendo 3DS and the PlayStation Vita, as well as the Nintendo Wii U, the PlayStation 4, and the Xbox One. These consoles continue to offer high-definition gaming and multimedia entertainment with upgraded specifications. Finally, the Nintendo Switch, released in 2017, is the first console to be considered a true hybrid of a home and handheld console. It can be docked and played on the TV or played on the go. As for the future, virtual reality continues to make progress thanks to companies like Oculus VR and HTC. One of the big three in home consoles, Sony has released VR equipment for its console, the PlayStation VR for the PS4. There are currently no plans to develop VR for the Xbox Series X, while the VR kit from the Nintendo Labo allows Nintendo Switch owners to make their own VR Toy-Cons. We have covered so many consoles over the years from the 1960s to today. Which ones do you own? Which ones did your parents or grandparents own? Which is your favorite console of all time? And what games did you play on it? Is there a console that we didn't talk about that you feel deserves an honorable mention? Let us know in the comments below. If you like learning about science, technology, history, and tons of other subjects, don't forget to help us grow and show your support for Feed My Curiosity by pressing the subscribe button. And now, on to the results of our pop quiz. What was Time Magazine's Product of the Year in 1993? If you said A, the 3DO Interactive, congratulations, you were correct. If you guessed incorrectly, don't worry, you can always try again in our next video. This concludes our 3-part series on the history of video games. Thank you for joining us on Feed My Curiosity. Take care.